Welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. Our theme for 2025 is the future of work. Meaning is the new money. In a world shaped by rapid innovation and constant change, the pursuit of purpose and impact has never been more important. I'm Dr. John Dentico, your host, bringing over 30 years of experience in leadership, strategic thinking, and purpose-driven innovation. Here, we tackle the pressing challenges of our time, from the rise of artificial intelligence to the growing need for meaning in the workplace. Together, we'll uncover how leaders can ethically integrate AI to enhance decision-making and keep humanity at the heart of their organizations. Remember, amidst all the technological advancements, in the end, it's always about the people. This podcast is your resource for actionable tools, thought-provoking discussions, and inspiring stories. It's time to go beyond leadership development and focus on leadership impact, creating workplaces where people thrive, innovation flourishes, and meaning truly becomes the new currency. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Now, let's throttle up and dive into today's episode. Hello again and welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. John Dentico. With me today is Dr. Douglas Scherer, a best-selling author, keynote speaker, board consultant, and educator who has dedicated his career to helping leaders, whether they're first-time founders or seasoned executives, break through barriers and lead with confidence. His best-selling book, Forged: 6 Practices of Great Leaders in Volatile Times, offers a roadmap for building trust, transparency, and resilience in high-pressure environments. As a hands-on facilitator, Douglas creates engaging, interactive sessions that help leaders sharpen their strategic thinking, refine their presence, and make decisions with clarity. Corporate ethics research and mindfulness-based stress reduction. He bridges the gap between practical tools and conscious leadership. Whether he's teaching in a master's program, consulting with boards, or inspiring audiences worldwide, Douglas equips leaders to thrive, not just in theory, but in the real volatile world we all navigate today. And I am truly pleased and honored to have him here on the podcast with me. Good morning, Douglas. How are you?
Good morning. I'm very well. Thank you.
Great to have you here. So, Doug, let's start off with my question for this year, and that is, tell me a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up? And what, in your mind, were some of the most influential aspects of your early life?
Interesting. So, born in Connecticut, but grew up in LA. I guess technically I'm a Valley dude. That's a question I hadn't considered for quite a while. The early aspects of life probably had to do with the mindset of taking care of people and taking care of community. I grew up in a community, my religious community. I wouldn't say I'm very religious, but at that time, there was a lot of social aspects to that community that my family was part of. I feel like that caring for others, and I hope I do, I aspire to anyway, kind of bring that forward into today's world.
Glad to hear it. Let me ask you this question. You advocate for conscious leadership built on trust, transparency, and collaboration. What does that look like during high-pressure decision or crisis?
First of all, it's a sense of care, right? Care for the other person, but also care for yourself. If you're burning out, they're burning out. And in addition to that, if you're burning out and you're burning out others, they're not working at their optimum. Right. So let's just take using Teams or whatever kind of chat thing you're using in your work environment. Studies that I've looked at from Microsoft to others have a range of recovery time from an interruption of anywhere from 5 minutes to 20 minutes. And and I've seen this, and if you're the same kind of way, and you've got 5 of these things open, and then you've got emails coming in. I mean, no one really gets phone calls anymore. But if you've got 5 of these things open and they're constantly going, and you're trying to work in the background or even hold a meeting, what that really means is that you're not really multitasking. There's no such thing as multitasking, but you're being asked to be there, which means you're being less of yourself for each of these things because you're really dividing yourself up. And if let's just average it out, let's say it's 10 minutes recovery time, you're not actually able to get to your full self ever because you're constantly interrupted. It starts over, interrupted again. That's where this idea of mindfulness comes in. It's not necessarily about meditation, but it's really about being aware of what's going on and be able to kind of protect your space and hold that safety space for the others in your team.
Very interesting. What it brings to mind is, do you see that same kind of phenomenon in terms of needing the mindfulness, whether it's in person, people in an office, or in a hybrid situation, whether they're not in the office working from a remote site? How do you look at those two areas in terms of mindfulness?
Yeah, it's such a great question because it's one of the things I talk about is it's not where someone's sitting as much it is the leadership and management approach you're taking to your group and how you're incorporating them. If you're bringing folks into the office, great, if that's what it needs to be. But if you're taking an approach that separates them and forces them to work against each other versus with each other, you're still going to have the same kind of separation problems. The mindfulness piece works in pretty much the same in both arenas. If you're sitting at your desk, whether it's at home or in the office, you still need to be able to take a moment when you need it. Sometimes it's just a moment at a time, right? Either it's a breath or it's feeling your feet on the floor or just taking a second to sense. I mean, there's never a number of techniques to do this, and we could even try some if you like. But the thing is practicing being aware. And I'll give you an example, if that's okay. For about 9 years, I led a global 24/7 IT response group for a very large part of a very large corporation. And so this was a constantly on kind of thing because I was the global lead of it. I would get into, and if people are calling a response group for a problem, that means people are constantly calling you problems. I was often getting back spasms and it was just incredible. Something would stress out and I wasn't practiced, right? So I started learning some of these techniques. I was like, I just can't go on like this. Just the breathing. And what you start doing is, I found it went in several phases. One is just practicing noticing when this thing's coming on. And that first part is key to know, whatever your environment is to know when you need to take that break. I noticed, okay, I feel it coming on. The next part was being able to work with it and take the back spasm down. And the next part is like noticing it way ahead of time, setting the intention, calming down, and not even getting to the point where I was having the back spasm. And I think that this to me is very emblematic of how people work when they're constantly being interrupted or challenged in non-productive ways, being aggressed, microaggressions even, noticing it coming on, and then being able to create the boundary or the response before you're just knee-jerk reacting.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like taking a breath of fresh air
Absolutely.
to step back from it and hopefully have time to reflect. Well, I know you and I think a lot about strategic thinking. And so I want to ask you this. It seems like a simple question. How do you differentiate between strategic thinking and strategic planning?
Strategic thinking is really the beginning of the process. Strategic planning is the second part. Strategic thinking is finding the alignment between the mission and vision, but overall, it's a process of opening your mindset to see all new possibilities. The strategic planning part is, now that I've got my direction, how am I going to get this done? What steps am I going to go through? Who do I need to engage? What's the implementation process? And then it's taking action on that plan.
Yeah, I differentiate it.
Mm-hmm.
Strategic planning is normally built around the goals and aspirations of the senior leaders in the organization. Here's a list of things they want to have happen, and how do you dedicate resources on the planning side to achieve those things? Strategic planning is looking to find answers to questions, where strategic thinking is about making sure you're asking yourself the right questions.
That's good.
I'm sure you've seen this 1,000 times. The halls of business are lined with the empty carcasses of organizations who never asked themselves the right questions.
Yeah.
In many respects, didn't want to know the right questions. They just kept moving down the line. A classic example is Sears, right? Who
Yeah.
would have imagined 35 years ago selling to Sears, hi, I'm from the future and you're going out of business. 35 years from now. They
They
were
used to
laughing.
sell houses. I mean, even around here, there are Sears homes that they sold in a package. There was a piece of land and they put it together, all the frames and everything.
Yeah,
It
I
was
know.
incredible what they were doing.
To me, if you don't do strategic thinking before you do strategic planning, you're going to be in trouble. You have to have the right questions to understand where you have to apply the resources. So the real problems, as I'm sure you've seen, one of the bugaboos of bureaucracy is the layers it creates in organizations where a middle manager may not want to elevate an issue to the upper levels to say, we really need to deal with this. I'm not telling them that. I'd love to get your reflection on that for a minute.
I'll tell you what, two things. One is I think your definition of strategic thinking and my thinking about it, even though the definition wasn't exactly the same, the real joining point and the really important point is critical thinking.
Absolutely.
That thing of opening up, questioning the question, are we even asking the right questions? That is really the key, and that's critical thinking, almost to the definition.
Many organizations talk about innovation, but you studied and taught it deeply. What's the biggest myth about innovation that leaders need to let go of?
This perfection, that you have to do exactly the right thing at the right time. You do have to do exactly the right thing at the right time, and some of that's luck, and some of it's making your own luck. But this idea that you can't recover, that everything has to come out perfectly, what I find overall is that there's a big striving towards having things be perfect. And that's not innovation. Innovation is very messy. And the more you accept that up front, the happier you will be, because it's just going to be that way. The likelihood that you're going to hit it, I mean, you might hit it out of the park the first time, but the likelihood that everything's going to be exactly right coming out of the box, it's extremely unlikely. I mean, in baseball, what do you bat? Like 30% or something.
Yeah,
100 is a good average. So, it's just not going to happen. So the sooner you give that up, the better. And one of the examples I use in my talks, and I spent a lot more time on it, is what does it even mean to have annual review now? There's this big glop in the middle of average, and then there's the people down here and then the people who are like super A+ stars. The striving is towards the A+ stars. Before the 1920s and the late 1800s, into the 1800s, late 1800s, the striving was to be normal. They had this sliver of normal and they wanted everyone to be exactly the same. The point is, if you're using someone else's idea of what success and perfection are, that's the other problem with perfection. Being able to come up with that definition of your own, not that you can't borrow someone else's, but that if you're waiting for those outside elements to tell you what your perfection and success is, you're never going to reach it because someone else is defining that for you. And so the more you really are able to open your mind, do that reflection, and come up with that definition for yourself, even if it's a process and it changes over time, the better off you're going to be and the more you're going to be able to make those innovative decisions.
Couldn't agree with you more, especially in the world we live in today, with AI really bringing a heavy hand to the creativity of people, ramping it up. I am a big believer in prototype programs, in rapid prototyping, the idea that let's be messy. We want to try to create a new product or a new service, do something really different. There's going to be failure, but failure is learning. We're going to learn what doesn't work. We're going to learn that, hey, maybe we should modify this a little. It could be successful, but we might have to modify it. I think you're absolutely right. The time of certainty has come to an end in many respects. What leaders have to contend with is we're living in a world of doubt and ambiguity. But let me give you a twist on that. Living in this world of doubt and ambiguity, if leaders can embrace this, opens the door wide open for collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what we're going to do. Well, let's get a group together and just sit down and work this over. Let's just put the feelers out. Who wants to be part of this? Let's put it on the table and see. I don't have the answer. Maybe we can learn our way to the answer. Maybe we can figure it out together. I'd love to get your reflection on that, Doug.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you and I both agree that learning is almost the key to leadership these days. You had already the Peter Senge systems thinking models already coming up. That's already like easily 20 years old. But even with, and I know you're a doctor, an EDD like I am, you probably know of Kurt Lewin and John Dewey. The reflective learning goes back that far, if not further, from the countries they brought it from. You have to have an open mindset. That open mindset is the learning process itself. You cannot learn until you've opened your mind to allow that information in. What John Dewey and Lewin were telling us as well is that you have to participate in that process. Like you were talking about before about strategic thinking, you have to understand what the context is in that you're operating in, which means what? In short, is like if you're a leader, you have to bring people together, connect with them, and really understand the entire situation as much as you can. That's where you have to start branching out and bringing in other people's knowledge. That's a little bit where this idea of what the class I most recently taught in this master's program was called strategic advocacy. And there's a good chunk of time in that class talking about the political landscape you're operating in. There's a great author, I can't remember his name right now, but his book is Political Savvy. It's a great book to look at. It was written in the 1990s, but he has a process in there of analyzing your political landscape. We do it in the class, and I do with others as well out there in the real world. What you do is find out who's for you, who's against you, their power structures, and their agenda. This is your personal strategic document. Once you've got that, you can start thinking through who are the trigger points that will help this person who's in a power position, but is not in line with my agenda. What is that person's agenda? Who's in touch with them? It's the political map that you come out with to see like, what are the political levers I can flip, to be able to get done what I need and allow them to come in alignment versus being against me the whole time. So that's a little bit more with the planning. I mean, the strategic implementation at that point, but it really starts again with having this open mindset. And the problem, I think, and I'd like to hear your take on this as well, is what forces people out of being able to work with this messiness is the ambiguity, right? Folks do not have a good tolerance for ambiguity because, why? It's ambiguous. We don't know what's coming up next. It's the fear of the unknown. This is one of the highest qualities you got to look for today. Things are changing very quickly. They're only going to get more rapidly changing. And they're changing in ways that we can't really predict a lot of the time. So that's where leaders have to be able to, and this was really the role of a strategic leader, is to come up with answers to things we've never seen before. And that requires a comfortableness with ambiguity. And that requires being able to be in the moment with lots of different information coming in and saying, you know what? I know where my balance point is, even though all these different signals and triggers are coming after me, stockholders, the people underneath me, the client, the customers. I mean, all those are pressure points. Where do you sit in this thing so that you're not just being constantly knocked around?
I agree completely. The leadership model I started developing over 30 years ago has one premise, and I've said this on my podcast before, and people I'm sure are getting tired of me saying it, but that's okay. And that is simply this. The one premise is it's based on one foundational point, contribution. It's about contribution. Mm-hmm. We have a problem. We have an issue. Who wants to help? Anybody got an idea? Anybody want a thought? I make no judgments about people in the room. No judgments about anybody. I'm looking for contribution, for somebody to help me get across this next piece. The second thing I'd like to reflect on is one has to trust the process. When you're dealing with ambiguity and bringing in so many different perspectives and ideas, one of the leader's jobs is to say to people, we're going to get there. Trust the process. It's messy. We live in a messy world. We're trying to find our way through that messy world. So don't panic. Everybody keep the faith. We're going to get there. And I think when you start to develop that, you start to develop this intuitive sensibility to deal with more ambiguity, because as we maneuver our way down the road, we're helping each other get there. Mm-hmm. We're collaborating. There's things I never knew before, understood before, starting to rear their heads. I see them and I now understand where we're going with this. So I absolutely agree. And in the final comment, I'll use my new way of describing it. I believe now what's happening is the old leadership models, the hierarchical models of leadership, are being shredded. They're being torn apart. You can't know all the time. You can't be certain all the time. And the way I describe it is this. For the past 60 or 70 years, maybe longer, we've raised a generation, in leadership development training, we've raised a generation of Jedi Knights. They come down, brandish the light sword, and solve all the problems, drive away the issues and problems. Okay, fine. There's times when that happens. But I look at leaders today to be more like Yoda. I look at them to be more as the counselor, the person who presents the challenge, who says, these are the risks you have to take. You will learn about yourself as you move through these difficult issues, through these ambiguous times, but we're all going together. Understand? This is not, you're on out here by yourself. I mean, Luke certainly was, but in the sense that we're going to go down the road together, and we need new ideas and new models of leadership that fit. I'd love to get your reflection on that.
Wow. I'd love to go down all of those roads. Just the Luke Skywalker one is the one that sticks in my mind the most. We talked a little bit about mentors earlier, possibly before we started recording, but he did have a mentor, Obi-Wan Kenobi, but at the end of the day, he still had to make his own decisions, right?
Correct.
And I think that's the thing about having mentors is you want them, you need them, and guidance is amazing. And asking for help, even if you're a top level leader, and combining with your team is also amazing. I mean, that's the only way you're going to get things done these days. At the same time, there comes a point when you have to take that faith and jump into the ambiguity in any situation where Obi-Wan's not there. You're now the decision maker, whether you want to be or not. It ties into what you said about the process. And I want to bring up this idea of, I don't know if you've heard of desire paths, but these are like what you see on big college campuses where they created a cement path back in 1922. But in the meantime, the students have all figured out, if I want to get to class quickly, I got to cut across the field. So all of a sudden you start seeing these paths worn in the grass. And eventually they just start paving over those paths. And so same as you do as an individual, like Luke Skywalker has to adjust to that moment and that moment of ambiguity. The process itself can be adjusted. It's if you don't have a process, you're just flailing. But if you have a path and you get somewhere, you go like, you know what, I can get there quicker if I just do that. You're now in charge. You're now defining a new path. You're innovating a new way. So it's not that you don't have a process. It's not that you can't throw out the old process, but sometimes the work itself generates the process you're going to. There's a thing called actor network theory that you're probably familiar with, which is that all the elements of the network and the thing that's happening, once one adjusts, like a new technology comes in, the people adjust. And once the people adjust, then all of a sudden you're getting AI, and then we'll adjust to AI, and then something else will happen. Part of that is the networks, and those paths are kind of the definition of the neural network of that organization in a physical environment. It's really showing us that these things have to adjust as time goes on, but you can't just have no mission, no vision, no nothing, but you do have to deal with the ambiguity of, I've gotten to a point in this thing where I don't know what's next. If it doesn't take me so far, I may have to create a new process. But that doesn't mean you go without a process. And sometimes you have to take a leap too, but then that's your process, but you have to be consciously making that choice.
I absolutely agree. For me, leadership is a process. That's the way I view leadership. I don't see this one individual is bestowing leadership on me. I think that I see leadership as a process. People do leadership together. That's one of my bylines, as I like to say. Let me go back because I have to clarify this piece. I absolutely believe that there has to be structure. There has to be a way in which people can say, okay, and in that structure, I'll see that more as management, much more about management to me is about efficiency, leadership about effectiveness. You need both. They hold each other's hands because you can't do the leadership piece without tying it back to something that people can eventually be grounded. We're going to try to make this leadership process more efficient and make a difference as we go down the roads. Bureaucracy is not going away. It may someday, but this is the way I envision it. Think of a baseball diamond, lines on the field, bases, rules, umpires, okay? There's a structure. There's rules that people will play by. Within the confines of the playing field, you'll see some of the most creative plays you've ever seen in your life. Creativity abounds within the structure. And that's how I see leadership and management in the future. Going down the road, there are structure. There's boundaries here. No question about it. We need that. Has to be. But at the same time, you're going to see some of the greatest plays you've ever seen. Yeah. The diving catch, robbing the home run off the back wall, because Aaron Judge can leap taller and higher than most people because he starts at 6'7". I'd love to get your reflection on that.
I love that imagery, and I think it coincides with the desire path thing. Think about how many ways you can get to any base at a time, depending on the situation. It's a perfect analogy for that. It says to me what it is to adjust to the situation in the moment. But I wanted to kind of float with you this thing that's like becoming more and more prevalent in what I see people writing about out there is this idea of act first, strategize later. And I think there's pluses and minuses of that. And, one is, okay, yeah, you want to act in short iterations. You want to have the goal. If you don't have any strategy, what I've seen happen multiple times is it's just an explosion with no idea where you're going. And then usually to me, that's wound up not so great. And then people are going back and go like, well, what's the strategy now that we've gotten to this crazy situation? Sometimes you got to explode things, but if you don't really have an idea, what I've noticed is, which is your baseball diamond, and that we have to get home runs and score, I don't see how, if you don't have a mission and a vision, how you're even acting. Like, what are your actions? What are the rules of the game? Even if you're creating the game and you don't have any rules, to me, you've got chaos. Sometimes that's okay, but I think what you're going to get is kind of chaos at the end of this thing, is what I've seen.
I absolutely agree with you. In fact, my starting point, that's something that I've come back to with great fervor. I mean, I abandoned it for a while, is the importance of a single one-line specific mission statement.
Right.
And you and I have seen mission statements that are a page long. What is this all about? You need one line. You need to have a galvanizing spirit. Now, here's the problem with some of the mission statements. Number one, mission statements oftentimes are written for the customers and clients outside the organization. I get that. It's part of branding. But what people fail to realize is that a majority of the mission statement, as far as I'm concerned, is written for the people inside the organization.
Yeah.
Who are we? Where are we going? You want to go on this trip with us? It has to, within the confines of one sentence, be very clear about its value system. I'm on a kick now that says hire for values, hire for heart. If you want to hire great people, you want values aligned with the organization and vice versa, because they may stay for 5 years. If you hire for skills alone and your value systems are not the same, they'll be gone fairly soon.
Yeah.
They're going to say, I don't belong here. We see the world completely different. I no longer talk about vision statements. I try to put it all in a mission statement for two reasons. Number one, simplicity. You can do the same. Number two is, I can't tell you how many times I've seen mission statements be vision statements and vision statements be mission statements. In other words, there is this confusion. What I choose to use, and I was greatly influenced by a book called Competing for the Future by Prahalad and Hamel. I think it's Gary Hamel, written many years ago, in which they said, forget about the visioning thing. What you really want is foresight. And I think foresight for me is a real tool that you can develop and use. You look and say, what's going on right now? What are the trends in technology? What are the trends in demographics? To your point, what are the trends in politics? What are the trends we see happening right now? Let's extrapolate that 5 years. What do we think is going to happen in 5 years? What are the expectations in 5 years? Maybe much more difficult to do now with AI, but you can still use it as a tool to look into the future rather than just trying to
visualize or visioning process. For me, I absolutely agree. I come from the military perspective. A ship doesn't move. A naval battle group doesn't move. Air Force planes don't fly unless we know what the mission is. What is the mission? What is it we're trying to do? Who's involved in that? And how do we work together to do it? So to me, you have to have a mission statement. And then mission plans, and you have to have an execution strategy as well. I'll toss it back to you. What do you think?
I don't disagree with you at all. I think that's all right. In many ways, the simpler the statement, the better. That also doesn't hone people into a certain, I mean, you want to get to the same place, but you don't want to force people to go in a car versus a bus. If you tell them you have to go in a car and they're going across the ocean, and that's the place where they find themselves at that point, you're in trouble. I love the idea of the smaller mission statement. And one of the things I've started playing with myself, one of the things I've started playing with more recently in my own work is lessening the gas pedal, taking the gas pedal off goals and putting it more on intentions. Because I found the more I focused on goals, on SMART goals, by this date, this quantitative thing, whatever the metric is, the less I was open to new possibilities coming towards me. Now I'm focused on this thing. And I realized there's like a whole world of stuff out here that I'm not participating in anymore, right? So I started taking the gas pedal off the metrics and the goals. You need them. I mean, if you're in a business, you need metrics and goals, let's face it. But I started focusing less on that and looking at ways of generating new business and having new business ideas. I really started looking more at intentions, who I wanted to serve, what kind of work I want to do, what brings me, and then opening up to seeing what comes towards me. And I'm finding that is far more powerful than saying, I hit this metric. Okay, great. Am I happy? Not? I don't know. And that also ties into me with your whole thing of values. I'll give you a Lego story. In the 1990s, there was a federal regulation about cyber crime, stealing code and stealing ideas. And then Lego had this motorized brick and you could program it. And as soon as that came out, Stanford engineer hacked it and then published the whole operating system to say, you can do anything with it. You don't have to just do what they're telling you to do. You can have complete control over this Lego thing. The lawyers came in and said, we are going to sue this guy up the wazoo because we want to protect our thing. The marketing guy came in and said, why are we doing that? The goal of Lego is education and creativity. This is now an opportunity to open that mindset, that value system up. And did that. And then the whole community came in and it now completely engaged with this whole thing of that the whole thing's been open. Let's buy more Legos. Let's do more stuff with it. Let's talk about it more versus clamping down and saying, we're just going to sue the heck out of them and make our money off of this, right? And stop people. Why did the company move that way? And why did that guy speak up? Because the value system stated, not in the mission statement, right? Not in the goal, but the value goal was creativity and education. They let that be the guide versus making a few more bucks over a lawsuit.
No, I absolutely agree. My favorite mission statements are one sentence, values laden. Hopefully you've got some ing kind of active verbs in there. This is acting, engaging, educating words that talk to action. This is the action we take. This is what we do. This is who we are in the world. It's a galvanizing spirit for the people inside the organization to say, hey, I like being part of this crowd. So even in your Lego example, there probably were people inside the organization saying, I like being with these people. They're doing some really cool things, and it's really exciting. Well, Doug, we're getting close to the end, so I want to ask you one more question if I can, and I'll let you take it where you want to go. Now, here we are. We're watching AI come faster than, we're drinking from a fire hose. And as fast as AI is changing, it seems to be a whole new model, a whole new idea, and others playing off that. Where do you see the future going in terms of leadership, people in organizations? What do you think people are going to want from an organization in order to be part of it and stay part of it for, let's just say, 5 or 6 years?
Yeah. I mean, hard to predict because it seems like every other day you're finding something new. I do see it taking certain jobs. And then I used to think, well, the one jobs it won't be able to take over is physical jobs, right? Now I'm seeing it more and more taking over physical jobs. I'm walking through the grocery store and it's cleaning up. I was in the airport the other day and a little bot was sweeping around me. Where's the future? I'm not sure where it all lands. I do know that we need to think differently. I'm learning a lot from my friend Judy Brandstetter, who's a HR consultant. She's been doing a lot of speaking about AI in HR and how it impacts an organization and individual's future within the organization. It's total future stuff. For instance, you might say, okay, great. We're going to replicate this person's thought process. We have subject matter experts. That to me is so replicable inside an AI engine and a bot of some kind. You can ask that question of an AI bot. Once you dump that knowledge, you could almost just scan their emails. The thing is that once that person leaves the organization, that bot will continue to develop based on machine learning. It's going to get more inputs and more answers, and it'll find out what's doing right and wrong. And it potentially has that person's name on it. Does it represent that person anymore? What does it represent? Is like singularity kind of stuff? It's hard to know what to do with all of that. That to me is one of the biggest things. It's a good tool, but they're finding more and more that it's training itself, right? So what do we do then in a world where it's out of control? That's why some folks are trying to put the full brakes on it, but at least to slow down and say, where's this going? But we don't even have control over social media to any real extent, and bullying in high schools and things like that. Or even what's good about it. I mean, we don't have any control of what's good or bad over it. The answer is, I don't know. But I do think that what we've discussed today about being constantly aware, constantly in the process, look at the opportunities, looking at the challenges on an ongoing basis is the place where we'll be able to, if there's any control to have over it, when I say control, like protection, but also where we're going to use it the best and to know what it's doing. I think we really have to be fully aware of what we're doing in the moment, whether we're dealing with other humans, whether we're dealing with AI, whether we're dealing with whatever. I think that's going to be the answer. This idea of authentic conscious leadership and dealing with ambiguity. We don't know what the future of that is. That's where the future of leadership lies. What the exact outcomes are, I think we can science fiction predict, but to be able to be there with it is the place where I think we have to go.
I would agree. I think transparency, ethical oversight, and considerations are going to play such a huge role in the future. But it's hard to predict because it's coming so fast. But, people have a tendency to kind of seek an equilibrium in a manner of speaking. They may start to push some of the tech away. I think it's happening now. I was telling a story the other day to some people that I can't tell you how many times I'll make a phone call to get some tech support or help, and a live person shows up on the other end of the phone, and you almost drop the phone. You're in disbelief. You mean I'm actually talking to a human being? Yeah, how can I help you? Wow, what a relief. What a wonderful thing. Something that 30 years ago we never even thought about. How great it is to get a human being on the other side of the phone.
Yeah.
It's hard to say where it's going. I think it can be an overwhelmingly positive tool, no question about it. But it has things that have to be kept in check. We don't have time today to talk about the nefarious characters who will use it for evil means. So it's wide open. Ambiguity will be here. Doubt will be here. But it may create a much richer path to greater collaborative opportunities. So we'll both be sitting, watching, and seeing how it goes. Doug, this has been an honor and an absolute joy to have you on the
Same.
podcast today. I truly appreciate your time, your effort, and all the work you're doing. I can't thank you enough. I wish you all the greatest success in the future. You, your family, and everybody. Thank you so very much for being here.
Thank you, John.